Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. My name is Audie Ratliff, and I post this diary on a weekly basis to let you know what has been going on in this past week at the Ratliff Mandolins Workshop. This week, we're going to be doing basically the same thing we did last week. I have 3 jobs per day that I'm going to be working on. It's going to be the same 3 jobs every day. First thing I'm going to do when I come to work is glue a piece of binding on a mandolin body and wrap it up and let that dry. And right now I'm working on mandolin number 5, and I'm down to the last piece on it. And when I'm done with it, I'll clean that body up and start on mandolin number 6. But every morning, that's the first thing I'm going to do is glue a piece of binding. The second thing, after that's done, the second thing I'm going to do is I am making some peghead overlays. I have some very, very pretty figured spalted maple and some cherry and some black walnut. And so I've split those pieces in half and I'm butterflying them out. And I just have these wonderful patterns, and I'm going to glue those together, sand them down to thickness, and I'm going to have some really wildly figured peghead overlays. So I have a stack of peghead overlays in halves in there, and so every morning I'm going to glue up one half and then lay it off to the side, and the next day I'll do another one. Now the third job that I'm going to go to every day is to be working down those backs that we've got going. I glued up enough wood to make 18 backs out of 3 different boards so that we could pick and choose. This back goes for this customer, and we'll have this back for that customer, and so on and so forth. So I've got 18 backs in there to choose for 10 mandolins, and but they're not completely done. They're bowled out on the inside, but they don't have the outside profile done yet. So that's what I'll be working on, and it's a fairly time-consuming job, and I'll get some footage of that, I'm sure, but I don't know how much more there is to tell you about it. It's a fairly time-consuming job, and I've got 18, almost twice as many backs as I need for this batch. So it's going to take the better part of this week, and if there's anything else to report, any other jobs that I get around to tackling, we'll take some footage of that as well. But for now, we're going to get started on mandolin number 5, wrapping the last piece of binding, and get our day started. It is Tuesday morning, and yesterday I got the final piece of binding glued on mandolin number 5. So the first thing on the job jar list today is to clean this thing up, clean all the excess glue squeeze off, get the final carvings down to the binding height on the top itself, make sure that all the dimensions are where I want them to be, and I'll sand everything down to 100 grit or so before I'll take this one off, put it in its box to await the neck installation, and start with mandolin number 6. and it is going to have black binding on it. So we're going to put the binding on this one next before we move on to the Peghead overlays. But first, we're going to have a couple hours worth of work right here. It is Wednesday. It is not Wednesday morning, and I'm not going to tell you what's on the job jar list for today. It is Wednesday evening, and so I'm going to share with you what I have done today, and also just kind of give you a quick check-in on how far along we are on the backs. But first, I have wrapped another piece of binding on mandolin number 6, and I have glued up another set of peghead veneers. And then I started on these backs right here. So let me kind of share with you where we're at with these backs. They have, of course, the insides are all cleaned up really nice and slick. The outsides have been roughly carved down well over 1/4 of an inch. They are way too thick, but they are still roughly in that shape. The footage that you watched was me running these backs in that sander only so far so that I could get these edges, these thicknesses right here, all even and all the thickness of the binding, which is pretty close to 7/32. So these things all the way around here, at least where I can get to, the edges here are all even. There's no humps. They're all about the proper thickness. Now, the next step is to go back and do the graduations down to the final thickness. Now, like I said, the binding is about 7/32, and so is an area right here in the middle. I'm going to take a pencil and show you. There's an area right here in the middle that's going to be roughly 7/32 as well, somewhere right in there. Maybe that's a little big. And then the 9/64 is the measurement that we want in a horseshoe shape right here. Let's just say something like that, and about that wide. And this is all just kind of a rough idea so that you find out what we're going to do. So we want this right here to be 7/32. This right in here to be 9/64. And then we're going to gradually go from here out, and as it comes out, we'll just thin it out from 7/32 to 9/64 right here, and then we'll have a flare wrap right back here to the very edge. It'll come back up to that 7/32, which is the thickness of the binding. So if we want to bind the back, then it'll be exactly the right height. And that's the graduation idea. So we have the edges here at the right thickness. And now we're going to go back and with the 7/32 measurement, and I'm going to go all over this mandolin with that because that's the thickest one. I'm just going to do it all. And we will, with finer grit sandpaper than that big heavy sander that I've got, will go down to the 7/32 measurement. And then and only then will we put this little horseshoe thing in here. That right there. at 9/64, and we'll drill those holes, and then we'll blend everything together so that you can close your eyes and feel through here and you won't feel any humps. It'll just be a nice steady graduation. So this thing will have to get drilled at least 2 more times, once for the 7/32, and then once for the 9/64, and then hopefully we'll be more or less ready to get the back ready to glue on the instrument, which means that we'll have to address the scroll and all that sort of thing. So all of these backs are done down to the roughest of rough graduations, including, I've just thrown in the top for mandolin number 4 while we're at it. So I'm bringing it along with these backs, and roughly the measurements are all the same for backs and tops, roughly. So that is where we're at. I'm going to spend the rest of Wednesday by just doing the drilling, the 7/32 drilling, all over these things, all the way down, and that will take the rest, certainly it'll take the rest of the day and probably a good portion of tomorrow, but we'll see. Why don't you check back with me tomorrow and we'll just figure out where we're at then. Now, real quick before we close off today's video, Wednesdays, this is the first one that I have drilled, and it's all drilled down to just a hair under 7/32. These holes, we're going to go to the bottoms of these holes, and then from this area right here, taper this down to the proper thickness here, make it nice and smooth and even, and then we'll have the back all carved at 7/32, and then it will be time to put the graduations in, which will be the 9/64 here, and then trim everything in again and again and again, just kind of sneak up on the final dimensions for this back before we go to doing any tap tuning or anything like that. So that's going to be what I'll be doing for the next 18 tops, or ever how many there are in there, is just drilling these holes out right here before we tackle them again with sandpaper. And I will see you tomorrow. It is now Thursday morning, and as you can see, yesterday I got 2 pieces of binding glued on mandolin number 6, and the first job on the list of things to do today will be to clean out another binding slot and put that double S-curve piece of binding in. That will be all I'm going to do today to mandolin number 6. Now I have worked my way down to the very last piece of peghead overlay, so I'm going to glue up one more piece of peghead overlay today, and then I will be done with that job. Now, as you can see, I drilled most of those backs yesterday. There's still a few left, so I'm going to finish that up after I get done with the peghead overlays in mandolin number 6. We'll finish up the drilling on those backs, and then I'm going to take a drill with a rubber pad and a slightly finer grit paper, still 80 grit, and I'm going to sand down to the bottom of those holes that are in those backs. And the reason I use something smaller and something less abrasive is because the closer you get to the final thickness that you want, more chance there is of error. So I want to sneak up on the final dimension so that I don't over sand too much. So that's the whole idea behind going to a finer and finer piece of equipment. And hopefully I will get to that today and get a few of those done. I won't have time enough to get them all done, and I also know that I have to leave early today because my better half, Bonnie Jean, has got a list of errands in town to run that's about yay long. So we got about 7 or 8 stops to do today, and so we'll be leaving sometime after lunch, and I'm not going to get all of those backs done, and it'll bleed over into tomorrow, but that's the job jar list for today. Okay, it is Friday, a little bit after lunch, and so far today I have gotten the last piece of binding glued on mandolin number 6. I have taken all those peghead overlays and sanded them nice and smooth down to about 65 thousandths, give or take, and added those to the pile of other peghead overlays that we have. So I've got a really good supply of nice peghead overlays, and I'm getting ready to get started on these backs, which I have, uh, as you know, drilled everything down here to the rough thickness, more or less. And I have taken yesterday's afternoon, I've sanded most of these backs down to the bottoms of those holes. And I really only have 2 more backs left and the top for mandolin number 4 to do before I do the horseshoe shape at the thinner, deeper measurements to get that taper in the graduation. So that's going to be what I'm going to finish up today. I will finish these here, and then I will start the drilling process for the deeper holes, and that's pretty much going to be the rest of the day. So I'm going to close the video off here. Thank you so very much for staying with me to the very, very end. As you know, come back each and every week for a new episode of the Ratliff Mandolins Weekly Production Diary. And I hope to see you each and every week in the future. Goodbye.